Hi there, it's Jennifer Strong. This week we've got something special for you. It's from Click Here, a news podcast about all things cyber and intelligence from our friends over at Recorded Future News and PRX. It's hosted by Dina Temple-Raston, and Dina and her team, they do a lot of stories that take you inside the latest cyber headlines. And a few months back, they sat down with a white hat hacker who discovered North Korean hackers were targeting him. Turns out, they picked the wrong guy. So take a listen, it's a great story, and we'll be back in the new year with some great stories of our own. Until then, thanks for listening, and happy holidays from all of us at Shift.
Everything got a little weird for Alejandro Cáceres around 3 years ago. That's when a friend of his made an introduction to a guy who went by the name James Willie.
I kind of knew that the whole James Willie name was fake. I mean, come on, James Willie, right?
But then people in the cyber world use fake names all the time, he told himself.
So, I didn't really think much of it.
Alejandro is 38, lives in Florida, and is a cybersecurity guy. His online handle is Pax, which he spells P, the number 4, and then the letter X. His specialty is writing exploits, the code that takes advantage of vulnerabilities in software. A few years ago, he decided to build his own cybersecurity business. And when you're starting out and building a client list, you tend to be less choosy. You just want to get customers in the door, even if in retrospect, alarm bells are ringing everywhere.
And of course, we're on like the shadiest chat messenger that there is, which is Telegram, but that's also not rare.
So Alejandro and this James Willie start trading messages, talking about their cyber experience, the types of projects they've worked on.
He asked me, I have what is the start of what I think could be a really good exploit. It is part of what we call a full chain exploit, and that's just where you are attacking a very complex program and it requires more than one vulnerability to really own the computer.
James Willie appeared to have found the motherlode.
In this case, it was Google Chrome.
Everyone uses Google Chrome, right? It's the vulnerability that hackers dream about because it could compromise so many computers. The problem, James Willie said, is that he couldn't quite get his exploit to work. Maybe Alejandro, with all his coding skills, could lend a hand.
It was very flattering, but not in an obvious way, he was just like, I think you can do this,
James sent him the exploit so Alejandro could take a look. Now, Alejandro isn't naive. He doesn't just double-click on everything that comes to him. So he opened the exploit in an air-gapped computer that wasn't connected to his system. And, you guessed it.
So it turns out that the project that he sent me was backdoored, and it was the dumbest backdoor I've ever been owned by.
Alejandro had been hacked, at least technically. Because he'd been careful about where he'd opened the exploit, he was able to contain the damage. At first he was mad, and then he was a little insulted. This was a super obvious phishing attack, and a really basic backdoor that was super easy to find.
I wish I could say it was some super hacker technique or something like that, but the frank truth of it is that he just knew the exact right carrot to dangle in front of me.
And for months, Alejandro didn't give it much thought, until one day he was reading a blog post by Google Tag, a threat analysis group, and one of their warnings caught his eye. Apparently, North Korean hackers were targeting cybersecurity researchers. And then Alejandro gasped.
It gave aliases that they used, and sure enough, one of them was James Willie.
James Willie, just like the name of the guy he'd been chatting with on Telegram.
What did you think when you read that? I mean, did your heart sink, or did you slap yourself on the side of the head? What was your reaction?
I think my first reaction was just shock, holy shit, I was just targeted by a nation state.
I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and this is Click Here, a podcast about all things cyber and intelligence. we tell true stories about the people making and breaking our digital world. And today, the story of Alejandro Cáceres, an American who got hacked by North Korea and then responded by doing something no one was expecting. He hacked them right back.
What exactly did you take down?
The answer is everything.
Stay with us. When Alejandro Cáceres was a kid, his dad didn't just bring him home a personal computer. He actually built him one.
My dad's a really smart guy. He's a PICU doctor, but somehow knows like a lot about technology. He would build his own computers.
And they weren't like the Commodore 64 computers that other kids had.
They were just sort of Frankensteins. And he just loved doing that. And I would use them and mess them up sometimes, and just do stupid stuff with them. So that's kind of where my first computer came from. Yes.
When Alejandro was around 13, he began logging onto that family computer, entering AOL chat rooms, and doing what budding hackers often do.
I started to get into what we would call now denial of service attacks.
DDoS attacks.
There was these little programs where you would flood people with messages, or you would use some funky tricks.
Funky tricks like adjusting the font size.
Like, for example, you increase the font a ridiculous amount.
Not just 14-point type, but like 1,000-point type.
You send it and it kicks them offline immediately. So I enjoyed it, and I honestly cannot describe why, besides the fact that I was just a little jerk.
Or you could say, like just about any other computer literate kid, he was trying to test the limits of the internet.
So in those days, there was the tools like Back Orifice, right? Those were, they were basically like you send a Trojan.
A Trojan is a type of malware disguised as legitimate software.
That's binded with a game or something like that. And you could just send it to your target.
Kind of the early version of what those North Korean hackers seemed to do to him.
My first proper hack, it was a friend of mine. I sent him this like really, really dumb game. And I told him, this game is amazing. You have to play it. And he opened it.
And suddenly Alejandro had access to his friend's computer. But if he wanted to take actual control of it, he needed the IP address.
In those days, when you sent an email, your IP address was actually right there. So I told him, hey man, like I'm having some problems with my email. If you could please send me a test email, I really want to make sure that this is working. He sent me a test email, and then I connected to his computer.
Then Alejandro started to have a little more fun. He started sending his friend fake error messages and then randomly opening and closing the CD tray. Remember those?
So did he think like his computer was possessed?
Yeah, that was kind of my goal.
And you'd think that Alejandro kind of saw the writing on the wall back then, that this computer stuff was his calling. But he didn't. Instead, he went to Duke and double majored in physics and math.
I wanted to be a professor, and just research and study and do physics for the rest of my life.
And that might have been the end of it, and we might never have met him had he not started working with supercomputers to finish his thesis.
My thesis was on heavy ion collisions and simulations of them. So I got to work with like a supercomputer that they had there, and that's where I kind of learned Linux, and also got an understanding of things like, what is remote access? How do you use it? Why do you use it? How does it work? Something kind of clicked in my mind, and I was like, oh, so there's remote protocols. People set them up like idiots, and then somebody breaks in, and that would be a hack. It was like a light bulb moment.
And it changed everything.
I'm a hacker, and that's how I always describe myself.
His official title is more like offensive security researcher, which means he doesn't just sit back and defend networks.
I don't focus on the security part of it. I'm an offensive researcher.
an offensive researcher. He's more interested in finding vulnerabilities that help you go on the attack. Which may explain why, for the past decade or so, Alejandro has applied for and landed a bunch of contracts that he can't talk about, with a roster of lettered agencies in places like the Department of Defense and DARPA. Which means one of two things. That hacker James Willey either had no idea who he was dealing with, or knew exactly who he was dealing with.
What do you think they really wanted?
They did hit a couple of other exploit writers. And so I know that they were looking for 0 days.
0 days. Those are vulnerabilities in software that no one knows about.
Was there a moment when you thought, hey, the North Koreans shouldn't get away with this?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I saw that they absolutely were going to get away with it.
In the weeks that followed, Alejandro talked to people he knew, FBI agents, other law enforcement, to see if maybe they'd step in and help him. Certainly they didn't think it was okay for North Koreans to attack Americans, he thought. But as the weeks stretched into months, it was obvious that no one was going to step in. He was positive North Korea had hacked him, and that they were hoping to steal exploits he had written. They actually put a back door on his computer, and there'd be no consequences for that.
So was there sort of this moment where you went, that's it, I'm going to get back at him myself?
Yeah, actually, that was kind of my first thought.
Let's hack North Korea, like the whole country.
The thought of bringing down a country was not really, I never really planned much, except for let's see what I can do.
Stay with us.
After years of fine print and hidden fees, if I've learned anything about phone plans, it's that there's always a catch. That's until I tried Mint Mobile. It's $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. I used to pay $50 a month for the same plan with a big-name carrier, but Mint sells wireless service online. They don't have retail stores or salespeople. All plans come with high-speed data, plus unlimited talk and text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can keep your number and your phone, and it took only a few minutes to switch in the Mint Mobile app. And if you travel a lot like I do, you'll appreciate the free international calls and deeply discounted travel data. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/shift. That's mintmobile.com/shift. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/shift. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers only. Speed slower above 40 gigs on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
In his public life as a security researcher, Alejandro runs a cybersecurity company called Hyperion Gray. He's kind of infamous for creating a controversial scanning tool called Punk Spider.
Has anybody here heard of the Punk Spider project?
He unveiled it at the DEF CON Hacker Conference in 2021.
Oh, sweet. More than like 5 people. It's more than I expected. Awesome.
So he's the kind of hacker who actually could launch a kind of revenge tour on North Korea. And he spent more than a year planning it. And it began with James Willey.
So you were really looking for him?
At first, I definitely was. After that, I kind of realized that's not really going to be fruitful.
James Willey was a fake name, and he probably wasn't online anyway. So Alejandro decided he would go bigger to see what he could find in North Korea's networks that were worth hacking. That would send a message.
I know their internet is extremely limited in terms of access.
And when he says limited access, he means really limited. Of the 26 million people who live in North Korea, only a few thousand get to actually use the internet the rest of the world sees. You actually need special approval to even get onto the internet. And then minders sit next to people while they browse and have to approve their activities. There's an hour time limit, defectors say, and then you have to apply again for permission to do more searches. So in other words, the odds that Alejandro's nemesis was online and searchable was pretty unlikely. And he started the way most hackers do, by running some scans of their infrastructure.
I knew that they weren't extremely sophisticated in their infrastructure. Maybe I will do some port scans and do some manual analysis and find something to break into.
So Alejandro thought maybe he could hack into some critical infrastructure in North Korea and send a message that way. But that wasn't working out very well either.
It's not like I could find the IP range for whatever the dictatorial palace is over there.
You can't find Kim's private computer.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, hopefully one day I'll be able to break in and it'll say like, Kim Jong-un's personal computer. Maybe he has multiple, like Kim Jong-un's personal, Kim Jong-un's porn computer, Kim Jong-un's official. Yeah, I don't know. So maybe someday.
And we should say here that Alejandro's hack, as we're about to describe it, was first reported by Andy Greenberg at Wired magazine. We're Alejandro's first broadcast interview, and we got a few new details. At its most basic level, Alejandro decided to launch an attack that would just overwhelm their internet systems.
The machine runs out of memory, and they'd have like denial of service conditions, right? I found a bunch of vulnerabilities to those. So I wrote a few little NDAs, as they call them.
NDAs, known vulnerabilities that no one's used yet. This was child's play, Alejandro thought as he moved through their systems. Their internet infrastructure was pretty rickety.
Wow, this is made out of like sticks and glue.
Then he began to wonder whether there was a better internet buried somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't see.
So I thought, I'll go rent a server in China. I don't care if they're watching. I will, just do it completely anonymously. It's, we have our ways. And I will do a scan from there. And I did a scan and it looked exactly the same. And I was like, wait, okay. And I was like, so it doesn't seem to be any kind of like special routing or anything like that.
And as he traced the North Korean infrastructure, he found this even crazier thing.
I started to notice and like the same 2 IP addresses just kept coming up. And I was like, wait a minute, that's interesting. Like usually when you have an entire country, it's a ton of them.
A ton of IP addresses. And he thought that couldn't be right. There must be more than 2 routers. He thought maybe there was an internet in North Korea that couldn't be accessed from the West. So
I basically made a big circle around North Korea. So I just rented 20, 30 servers, and they're literally circling North Korea.
And sure enough,
there's 2 routers.
North Korea was running its connection to the rest of the world's internet through just 2 machines, both of which Alejandro decided to hack.
I was just like, that's incredible. I've never seen that. Let's see what I can do.
And it turns out, while the routers were bigger than something you might have at home, they weren't all that complicated. So he just did a kind of denial of service attack on those 2 vulnerable routers. And just like that, he literally took down the web in the Hermit Kingdom. Everything from their government portal to the state news services to the booking site for North Korea's flagship airline, Air Koryo.
And what would they have seen on their end?
Yeah, on their end they see absolutely nothing, which is the best part.
Are they getting like a 404 error message?
Oh, yeah. In terms of when it actually went down, yeah.
And researchers all over the world who monitor that North Korean internet said they saw these mass-scale attacks.
So this guy was able to run a script, and as they were doing their own thing, their American computer was destroying the backbone infrastructure of North Korea's entire country.
Literally all North Korean websites were under attack, of which there aren't many, by the way.
And no one knew who was behind it. North Korea's internet was down for 9 days before Alejandro decided to restore it.
My goal was really just do it for about a week. And the idea was, I want this to be proportional. I don't think that, I don't want it to be like your internet's down forever.
Still, Even the act of taking down a nation's internet for more than a week is pretty out there. And the U.S. government had watched it happen and was a little curious about how Alejandro pulled it off. Some of his hacker friends, who had links to the Pentagon, put him in touch with some high-level people. And Alejandro says he went and talked to them about joining him in offensive cyber.
I outlined the exact methodology that I used for North Korea, and I outlined how it could easily be reproduced with a very, very small budget. Like, compared to what they have, it's nothing. It's like a penny for them.
Alejandro said that the people he met with were intrigued, but a little reticent. They didn't seem to want to engage in these kinds of aggressive offensive cyber operations. And Alejandro is like,
hey, I'm this guy. I have real solutions to your problems. What I have is I have literally one program that can stop every single cyber attack that comes out of North Korea.
Alejandro said they said, thanks, but no thank you. There are some valid reasons why the Pentagon or U.S. Cyber Command weren't eager to adopt Alejandro's aggressive stance on hacking back. For one, his takedown of the North Korean internet wasn't really a military target. It was a civilian one, and attacking something like that is usually considered a war crime. That's what Russia is dealing with now as it attacks Ukraine's civilian infrastructure.
There was a lot of debate initially.
This is Jackie Schneider. She's a fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, and her research focuses on the intersection of technology and national security.
Is offensive cyber more like dropping a bomb or more like spying? Because those are actually different authorities, spying versus dropping a bomb.
Jackie says what he was essentially asking the Pentagon to do is an end run around these rules called authorities, which determine what the government can and can't do in cyberspace. And it's complicated because not only is the U.S. still trying to figure out when offensive cyber is appropriate, but it's also a completely different kind of weapon. Unlike bombs, cyber weapons aren't something you can just stockpile and then pull out and use whenever you want.
So at the beginning of cyber operations in the U.S., we thought about building cyber attacks like we would build those kind of bombing plans, right? The problem is the network changes all the time.
Vulnerabilities get patched, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. And so you can't actually put a cyber attack on the shelf.
By the time that approval actually comes through, the vulnerabilities in the network that were going to be used could be gone.
Something that worked 2 hours ago might not work when you go to execute it.
Right. Or you're sitting in a network, and then all of a sudden the way you got in is no longer open.
Exactly.
So is a hack a bomb or just spying? Jonathan McGrath, a former executive officer at the U.S. Cyber National Mission Force, says Alejandro is right. There need to be new rules about when it's appropriate to punch back in cyberspace.
I know what international waters are. I know if we have a ship off the coast, and it's 20 miles out, at the end of the day, we all know the boundaries for international waters. But when it comes to cyber, we somehow let the bullies hang us upside down and shake the change out of our pockets every second of every minute of every day.
Jonathan thinks the U.S. should start contracting some of this offensive hacking out to trusted firms like they do more traditional weaponry. They could set up some rapid response teams.
Where is a nation going to draw its red line, right?
Which is exactly what Alejandro says he was doing, drawing a red line.
I'm really not advocating for anything like crazy radical, like let's attack back everybody that attacks us. It's really more just, they're not just attacking government stuff. They are now hitting private citizens and nothing is being done.
That is until North Korea targeted the wrong guy, and he decided to teach them a lesson by turning off their internet for a little while. This is Click Here.
That was Dina Temple-Raston, host of the Click Here podcast from Recorded Future News and PRX. The series tells true stories about the people making and breaking our digital world. New episodes are available every Tuesday and Friday, And you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week. I'm Jennifer Strong.
From PRX.